Started recording for everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Noyes. I'm in the communications department. And thank you for joining Ms. Warren on her virtual community meeting this month. She alternates from in-person to virtual, and wanted to welcome you all and just set a couple of reminders on virtual meeting protocols. We will have several presentations. But generally, if you have questions along the way, please put your questions in the chat. We'll be calling or reading those out, or you can use the raise your hand function, and we can call on you and you can open your mic. And with that, Ms. Warren, I'll turn it over to you, and you might want to recognize our special guest.
Absolutely. So before I get started, we have Chairman Pitts from Fulton County Commission. Chairman Pitts, if you can come off mute and just tell us anything we should know that's happening at the commission. And first off, thank you for being here.
I am on my own here for a few minutes by myself, so hopefully can you hear me okay?
So, yes, we can
Yes,
hear
sir.
I have no idea what. Anyway, so thank y'all so much for allowing me to participate very briefly. It's a busy evening here for me as always, but particularly during this season. Things are going well here at your county government. This is qualifying ended for the upcoming elections, and so we're busy at work trying to ensure that the 2022 elections run smoothly, and I'm certain that they will. There's a sort of a breaking news announcement. But the Board of Registration and Elections voted today to name an interim director while the search for a full-time director is going on. So stay tuned for that. But we're getting prepared for the May 24th runoff with early voting to begin on May 2nd. So with that, I'm here to listen. I'm a strong proponent and believer in our public education system. And so I just like to visit as much as I can and as often as I can to find out what's on people's minds. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And let me publicly thank you, because you've been working behind the scenes with Fulton County as we put more supports for our students around mental health as we work with the commissioners. So thank you for your work and helping us get those funds. So as we start tonight, it is a beautiful, hopefully spring day. And usually how my meetings go is that we try to have a panel every meeting on topics that are being talked about in the community. Last month, we talked about bullying, and we had a great conversation from that was student-led about bullying and what needs to happen to help our young people as they transition back to school from 18 months of being home. Tonight, we're going to talk about the middle school transition, because this is a hard transition. As a parent of 2 middle schoolers, middle schoolers are just fun. That's the word I'm going to use. And so I wanted to bring the principals together to talk about academics, behavior, and just some things that parents need to know as they go into this. Next month, when we'll be in person, we'll be at Creekside High School. We'll be doing some things around student engagement. But tonight, we're going to talk about the middle school transition. This will be about 30-40 minutes. You will be able to ask questions in the chat. After this, we will go into student enrollment projections, and then we will end the meeting, because as you can see, we have principals on the line, we have teachers on the line, we have community members on the line, and everybody wants to get home to their family. So Mr. Maxwell, I'm going to pivot it to you or Dr. Candace for the roundtable. Do you guys want to go first?
Yes, ma'am. We'll go first. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Maxwell. I'm the Zone 3 Superintendent. And then there's Dr. Candace.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Candace. I'm the Zone 2 Superintendent.
And I don't know, Brian, I'm assuming you have access to be able to share. I sent you some slides.
I haven't. I'm sorry, I hadn't checked my email. Let me look and see. So give me just a second. And yes, I can share. I've got it up. Ron, it's just going to take me a moment if you want to go ahead and get started.
All right. So welcome parents, welcome community members, staff members. Today we're going to have our middle school principals just share with you some information about the big rocks that are taking place in our middle schools. And Miss Latoya Molly will not be here this evening, so she will have Assistant Principal Buford Varnon will present for the middle schools. And Dr. Kennedy, did you have anything you want to say before the principals get started?
No, we just say again, thank you as you listen to our middle school principals talk and share with you about the different happenings in middle school and some of those things and how we would like to continue to partner with you as your children transition to middle school or or if your children are already in middle school. And so Mr. Maxwell and I will be monitoring the chat. We just ask that if there's something specific to a specific school or a concern that's happening at a school, that you reach out to either myself or Mr. Maxwell concerning one of the 4 schools that are being represented tonight, and we will be able to work with you regarding those specific concerns. Tonight, you'll get an opportunity to hear an overview of the middle schools in District 4. So we thank you for being here tonight, and thank you in advance for your support of our principals.
Dr. Candace and Mr. Maxwell, can you guys see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just let me know when to advance.
Advance. All right, so we'll have principals talking about and assistant principals talking about relationships and routines, instruction, community engagement, and upcoming events. And really, this is just tips for parents. And really, I want you to think about how we can partner in this work. I think it's really important that we talk about the partnership that we need to have to ensure that our scholars are successful and we have thriving schools. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Jackson with the relationships and routines.
Mr. Maxwell, can I add one point? I forgot to say something really quickly.
Sure, ma'am. It's your meeting. Yes, ma'am.
And parents, I wanted us to talk about this because parents literally right now are in terror mode because their babies are going to middle school. So you've been in the same school for 5 years. You know all the teachers, you know the administrator. And so when my kids were going to middle school, I was scared. I heard stories. My kids have been fine. And so I think it's important for you to hear, for you to ask questions that are on your mind, because these are the experts who work with middle schoolers. Middle schoolers range from 11 to 14. Is that about the age? 10 to 11 to 14? And they come in one way and they leave a totally different way, in a good sense, right? They're more mature. So parents, as you're listening to this, take your notes, ask your questions, because you're going to be okay. We survived middle school, so you will too. Okay, let me get off so my dog's barking.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time out to listen to a glimpse of what we have going on in our middle schools. So one of the things that we often do is make sure, not often do, but we always make sure that whatever takes place in our schools are aligned with the district big rock. And one of the district's big rocks is relationships and routines. So we have a few activities that is common amongst all of the middle schools on the south side, but more particularly in District 4, and that's with PBIS rewards and incentives. And we take that time to celebrate our students for attendance, behavior, and academic achievement. And what that does is it allows other students to be motivated and to set goals around their own attendance, around their academic goals, as well as their behavior goals. The next thing is we often take time out because we know that things happen in the schools.
And I did talk about the roundabout, but I wanted to talk about this on a separate slide. As you probably know, inside of the roundabout, Councilwoman Rowell and
can someone
before years.
Okay, so I'm back. So what we do in a middle school, which is also common, is that we have quarterly and monthly town hall meetings with each grade level, and to discuss and reinforce the expectations in our school, especially if something does happen. We talk to our students and we walk them through a process of how things could have been differently, and what can we do as far as moving forward and put those things in place. We also have student and staff recognition, which is big in all of our schools, because this is a time that is unprecedented with coming back to school and making the transition from COVID, from remote learning to being in school part-time to being in school full-time. Oftentimes students haven't been rewarded. And so we do take time out to make sure that not just the students as well as our staff. And we also enjoy when our students have and we provide opportunities for them to do performance, to perform amongst their peers. And what the great part about these performances and these activities, such as pep rallies, concerts, talent shows, etc., that they are student-led initiatives in which they are allowed to be creative and explore and express themselves. And one of the things that actually stood out, for example, Camp Creek actually participated in Beat the Street 360 program. And this was a program that was focused on SEL lessons, career and college readiness, bullying, and mental health, and goal setting. So each middle school do have opportunities to get involved in these different types of initiatives to help our students grow mentally as well as physically and socially. And then we also encourage our students to get involved and stay involved with the beautification of the school community. And that's either inside the school as well as outside of our school community. Teaching students to be invested in taking care of the place that they come to every day. So that way they can, a place where they can be proud and see their work on a day-to-day basis. And also, we can't have a school without the participation and the partnership with parents. And each school has a thriving PTSA, in which these PTSA members are parents as well as students and staff members are fully committed to the changes and the needs of each school. And last but not least, we also, with the increase anxiety of what goes on in a middle school, each of us have support staff such as professional counselors, additional staff members, there'd be teachers, paraprofessionals that are monitoring our school on a day-to-day basis to support students and staff members with whatever need that is possible or any issues that arise. And the number one focus is making sure that they're visible so that way students can feel safe. And so that's a little bit about relationships and routines within our schools.
I'm sorry, I didn't do a good job of introductions. This is Felipe Jackson, the proud principal of Bear Creek Middle School. I'm sorry, community.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jackson. Can you talk a little bit? About, because for my kids, I guess, friends in that age range, like I've noticed even with my own kids, like them having to figure out the friends thing, because you have all these kids from other elementary schools together in one school, and they got to figure out how to make friends. So what advice as a middle school principal do you give to parents who are anxious about that? How do they manage relationships, those type of things?
So, well, the first thing is speak to your child about who their friends are. I will also say, take them out and actually conduct tours. And I didn't mention that, but go and take a walk at the feeder middle school. If you can do it during the instructional day, set up a meeting with the administrators, counselors, and we can arrange for several students, ambassadors, or just students that they know that probably went to their school or live in a neighborhood where they can do a school tour. I will also say, start talking with students and socializing them around the appropriate use of social media, because a lot of it, of what they see, just making sure that they're monitoring that of the do's and don'ts, and making sure that they speak, being able to learn to speak up. And when I say speak up about how they feel and how they express themselves, and just if anything else, just the importance of being nice. That saying, it's always important. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice to each other, because the challenge that I know that I have at Bear Creek is getting students from different communities to coexist under one roof, right? Teaching the students about there are people from different backgrounds, whether it's ethnicity and socioeconomically, and teaching what is it like to be just a human being? What is a good person? What is the value of making the right decision? So that's there's several ways that you can actually help transition your student from one setting to the next.
Thank you. I have one last question, because somebody just texted me this. We've had lots of conversations in the past months around bullying. And one of the things as a middle school principal, what do you think is like the number one thing that you see kids get into that they have no idea about how to handle? Like what do you suggest to parents? Parents, if you didn't hear him, he said tour the schools. So I always tell my parents, if you're thinking about sending your child, or if your child's going to 6th grade, go visit the school, talk to the principal. You'll leave as a better informed about our schools. But what do you see on that relationship, that bullying, those things that kids get into, they really maybe don't understand because they're so young?
Well, the first thing is educating students on what bully is, the difference between someone being mean and someone actually intimidating someone. Also talking to them about expressing themselves about what makes you feel uncomfortable and how to address that. So that, and it's a sensitive topic because we have students who still have not been able to mature to understand what that is. But if anything, at any time a student, staff member, or anyone makes you feel uncomfortable, tell an adult so that way you can process that. Right now, I can say that our PTSA has actually conducting a anti-bullying campaign, and the goal is to educate our students and within our school community about how to treat each other, but also what to do if you feel a certain way, so that way we can distinguish the difference between someone being mean and someone actually being bullying. And then we also reiterate what those consequences are for those who decide to make those wrong decisions.
Thank you so much. If parents have questions in the chat, they can put them in. Last but certainly not least, you touched on something, and I wonder if parents, I didn't realize this, when you say interacting with different people, like this might be the first time. What do you mean by that for those entering 6th graders? I know your school is super diverse, just like some of the other schools, but what are some of the things that you see kids kind of what are they shocked by?
Well, I could tell you this. They are shocked by and so we have people who actually, and as I say, who come with some values that parents instill in them. And then we have some students that may not have those same values. So, and that's very difficult, because if your child is at a school, or if your child is at home and they're one way and they have this reputation even throughout their schooling and the school that they come from, those expectations where they haven't heard a curse word on a regular basis. Then all of a sudden, their first day in their class, you sitting next to a student who doesn't live in your community. You never saw them, come from a different school, and they're just dropping all types of profane. That part is very shocking because, one, we don't use that type of language in our house. And it's not like schools, we don't use it at school. However, some students bring some of those characteristics with them. Some students try to reinvent themselves to make themselves appear as if they are the next best thing, or the man or the woman, from their neighborhood to a school as a way to influence other students' behavior. And so one of the things is we just have to be mindful, if we are, and I don't want to use the word shelter students, our children, but just have an open, honest dialogue about, there are some people in society that don't have the resources that we may have, and this is how we have to learn how to coexist with them in our society, in our community, because each school is a replica of the world that we live in, if we want to be honest and think about that.
Thank you. I think we had Mr. Tatum, then Mr. Davis has a question in the chat, and then Ms. Hamlet. So Mr. Tatum, do you want to come off mute, or do you want to type it in?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Mr. Tatum.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me ask you this, and this is no indictment against anyone. I'm just trying to get some understanding on how do we, as a school community, set the tone for how students behave in our schools. And the reason why I'm asking the question is because as you all, everybody keep up with the news, and we having little things that is going on in our schools, and they have in all schools. But my thing is, when we as a school community gonna say, enough is enough. Here's how our school's gonna operate, and regardless of what background you come from, here's the rules and regulations that you and your parents gonna have to abide by. I mean, at some point in time, we all as a school community gonna have to pull the gloves off and say, enough is enough, and here's how school's going to operate. Because when you look at the code of conduct books, when you read a whole lot of stuff in there, there's a whole lot of process and procedures that we already have in place that can guide us through troubled times and all, but they are not being implemented. And that's one of my questions that someone can answer is why are these process and procedures are not being implemented? Thank you.
I'll take it, Mr. Jackson. So, Mr. Tatum, processes and procedures are being implemented, but we have a misinterpretation of just because a kid misbehaves one time, they're going to be kicked out of school. That is not the process. It depends on what the discipline infraction is. And so we have to ask that. But I think we need to have a bigger conversation as a community, right? So the school is a hub where people from the community come together, right? Now, if we go and look at math, science, social studies, and English, there's no standards that teach misbehaving. So some of that is learned behavior. So some of this is that we got to have a partnership. This is where this partnership comes in. How do we hold our neighbors accountable? So we have processes and procedures in schools to say, okay, a kid can have ISS, they can be suspended, and then sometimes they can be recommended for a tribunal. But there is a process. It's progressive. It's called progressive discipline. So we have to understand that just because an infraction happens does not mean a kid's going to be removed from school immediately, depending on what the infraction is. So the principals are following the student code of conduct and the processes that are there, but that doesn't mean every time that as soon as a kid does one thing, they're going to be removed from school.
Thank you for that, Mr. Tatum.
Yes, and thank you for answering my question. Now, I'm not 100% satisfied with your answer, but I understand where you're coming from. Okay, but anyway, I guess and Mr. Maxwell, you know me, and I shoot straight, and I appreciate all you've done. And I've watched you over the years when you was a principal at Creekside High School, really single-handedly turn that school around. And I watched a lot of your techniques of how you done it. And I guess my question is, and I watched several principals in our district in South Carolina who have done fantastic jobs in leading our schools. And I guess what I can't wrap my arms around why we can't duplicate that kind of leadership.
Okay, so I think so I'll say this, I'll say for every principal that's here, it takes time, right? I'll say first thing, I was in the building for 5 years in that particular school, so it didn't happen overnight, and it's a collective process. I think the reality of what we're feeling right now is that we were out of school for over 18 months, okay? So it's heightened across the nation. And if we're really honest, it's heightened because there's a political influence for it to be heightened for people that look like us. But we don't really want to talk about that real truth there, right? So when we think about it, and so we have an issue that is happening, and so that's where we are. So we have discipline that's at a rise. But what I will say is that there is a but. If we go back and look at our discipline data from 2017-18, what you will see is discipline was higher in 2017-18 than it is right now in 21-22. So what I contend to say is, this has been an ongoing problem, right? And now it's at a whole nother heighten because, as they say, it's being televised.
I want to add
those are great points. I do want to, Ms. Warren mentioned there were a couple of questions in the chat. And I know there are a couple other principals that are also slated to present. So I just want to be mindful of the agenda. Mr. Tatum, as always, thank you for raising and talking about the issue of leadership. One of the questions for the group, I guess, is from Mr. Davis. What are some of the things that your school's SGC can do, perhaps using charter funds to address some of the issues in the middle school? Mr. Jackson, you're on mute.
So one of the things, not just one of the things that our SGC does is each month when we meet, they analyze. First of all, I review the data with the school community, and then the SGC they actually send out a survey to our staff members on what they see is the need, and then they're able to request funds to address. To get the resources to address those needs. So that's one of the things that our SGC does on a monthly basis.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Davis, you want to follow up with a question, and then we'll move to the other principals that we have, Ms. Williams, Ms. McDaniel, and then we'll have another question. But Mr. Davis?
Right. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and follow up with that with Mr. Jackson. I guess it would be the same thing with Ms. McDaniel and Ms. Miley. And I'm concerned that with the charter funds and the different metrics to address certain problems, that all your elementary school and your middle school working together to make sure that when they get into middle school, that when you sit down with that elementary school principal, that he or she can identify issues that need to be addressed in middle school. And for an example is that when I address things when it comes to Westlake SGC, I normally may reach out to Ms. Miley to find out what's going on at Sandtown. So when those 8th graders get to be 9th graders, so we can have things in place. So I'm just more concerned. I've heard different principals say PTSA, but I want to know, how are you using a cooperation between the different SGC from the middle school, from the elementary school, to make sure that you have programs in place that can address some of the issues that these kids are facing?
Mr. Davis, that is a great question and a great segue over to Ms. McDaniel. If you wanted to address that and mention any of the other parts of your presentation.
Hold on a second.
No, I mean,
I wanted to say.
I'm sorry, Ms. French. Yes, Ms. Warren.
Hold on, Mr. Davis, go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, I trust, I know Mr. Jackson and Ms. McDaniel and Ms. Miley. So I know that they're working hard. I just want to make sure that there are things that their SGC, especially when it comes to the community engagement, so parents can know, because I think one of the things that Ms. Warren stated earlier is that you hate to have a 4th or 5th grade and then you wondering and worrying about what's going to take place in middle school, when there are things that you should have some knowledge of that before they get in middle school. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. So I wanted to add to that specifically we started this year in the Langston Hughes cluster, getting together all the SGCs. So this has been, we're 3-4 months in, where the SGCs are planning together to address things that we're seeing as patterns in the district. So just like Mr. Davis said, how are the SGCs handling it? It's important because SGCs get charter money. And so for the parents who are listening to this, and we've been asked in other clusters, specifically Creekside cluster, and I think some of Westlake cluster, we got all of the SGCs together, brainstorm what's going well, what's not, and what are the initiatives to address that. So I hear what Mr. Davis is saying and what Mr. Tatum is saying, and you guys are right. I also want to add to what Mr. Tatum said about behavior. One of the things that's very difficult for parents to know is that when something happens, there is an assumption that nothing was done to the child. And as a school district, people know this, if you've worked in a school, we're not at liberty to discuss what discipline has happened. But when you have certain offenses that occur, it is out of our hands, it becomes criminal charges. So I want parents to know that because the discipline isn't broadcast out to the community, this happened, there are things that happen to children. An example is at Sandtown, I know that there was an incident, I'll use my child. There was an incident with my child where someone was harassing him and the school mediated, brought the kids together, had them work it out. all of these things they did that no one would have seen unless they were in it. So I just want to tell parents that a lot of times in the community, people will say nothing is happening to the children, especially in middle school. When you have a 10-year-old who does something, unless it's a level 4, there are things we have in place. I just wanted to make sure we said that. Brian, I know Ms. McDaniel is going next, but we have a question about bullying initiatives for incoming 6th graders or small groups so scholars understand the importance of, I guess, managing their relationships with their peers. So maybe Ms. McDaniel can address that as she starts hers.
I'll just say, we started out with the big rocks, which is common across the district. And SGC.
Please, can you put your mic up? We can't really hear you. I'm sorry.
What's common across the district and to every school in Fulton County are those 3 big rocks: the relationships and routines, instruction, and of course, our engagement, enrichment, all of these things. And so with SGCs, we align all of our expenditures, our conversations are aligned to those things. Whatever's going on in the school, in the feeder pattern, that's aligned to it. And we try to make sure that we are able to allocate funding and resources towards when it comes to programs. Each school has, of course, counselors, mental health agencies. Our first thing that we're going to do is implement PBIS and check and connect, make sure that students are able to talk it out. In middle school, that is really the biggest thing. Conflict resolution. We assume that students know how to resolve conflict, and they're just learning these skills, and they need to be sometimes explicitly taught those skills. If the way you know to resolve conflict is to yell or scream or fight it out, then that's going to be your go-to until it's replaced with another behavior. So our counselors, our administrators, even our peer mediation groups, they do a really good job of developing those skills and so the conflicts, the things that we see coming through the front office in August and September is very different than what we will see at the end of the year, because they have matured developmentally and they've learned skills, they've overcome conflict, that friend that they may have had since 3rd grade now has found another group of friends, and sometimes that is difficult. So it's all about the developmental stages of middle. Mr. Maxwell, do you want me to go ahead and skip down to my part? I could talk about instruction, but I think Ms. Canty is doing.
Leah, go ahead and talk about the part that you had, I think, which is in community engagement. Brian, can you go back to the other slide, please?
With regards to community engagement, Mr. Jackson, talked about many things. One, and we have events that wrap around community engagement. Title I meetings, parent universities are going on right now. And Ms. Williams is going to talk more about the specific common community engagement activities that go on. I'm going to talk about upcoming events across the board. So throughout the year, we want to make sure that not just our students are engaged, but the community. The more engagement that we have from you all, the better off we are. So we are sponsoring things like Saturday School. We know that Georgia Milestones is coming up. So Saturday School, March Madness, Georgia Milestones, although we are definitely equipping our students all throughout the year so that they are mastering those standards. We also want to make sure that they are prepared for what the assessment, the Georgia Milestones assessment feels like. It's different than a regular school day. And so making sure that they are equipped, that we are at our best. There was mention of what can you do to make sure that the transition is seamless for middle schoolers. Make sure that you engage with the principal, with the events. We host athletic events, extramurals, intramurals. Our basketball seasons just wrapped up. And so those are all events. You don't have to be a middle school student or a middle school family to engage in those events. And it also gets them excited about coming to the middle school and starts to develop that school pride. We are all also gearing up. Many schools are already sponsoring, may have already started those, but the transition activities for rising sixth graders. Every year, middle school, either we go into the elementary school and speak with fifth grade teachers. There's that vertical alignment, or we will do virtual meetings just to make sure that we are preparing for our incoming class of sixth graders. I know specifically at Camp Creek, we have a Future Warrior Wednesday coming up, where any families new to Camp Creek will be invited in for a night where they can see the school, learn about sixth grade or just in general, and have a chance to have face-to-face quickly with extramurals, fine arts, CTAE. Every school has something like that. In addition, fifth grade students take field trips and they will come over and they'll get to, with their entire fifth grade class, get to come over and experience a pep rally, the band, a huge welcome, learn about that particular middle school's culture and get a quick tour during the instructional day. They'll walk through the halls of the school, and which is another way to begin to transition them to middle school. The biggest worry, they're concerned about lockers. That's typically the question that's asked. What about the lockers? What if I get lost? All of those things are thought about. We also have different summer camps, what we call Camptastic, or summer bridge programs that serve as an orientation. Especially last year and this year, it's important for those students who've been out of a school building for 18 months to be able to come and see where they're going to be spending the next 3 years. So make sure that you engage with your schools. We send our s'mores, our newsletters to the area elementary schools. It's on our websites. Check out the websites and make sure that you are looking at those events and start partaking in them. Also, end of the year activities, summer reading programs, Screen on the Green, academic book clubs, all of those things. You'll hear announcements. Don't just ignore them, actually engage in them, because whenever they arrive and start to acclimate in the fall, they will be familiar. They will already have relationships with other students that are not at their current elementary school, and it just makes the transition much easier.
And Miss McDaniel, you're gonna laugh about this. My daughter just got done playing basketball, and if you want to see student engagement, go to those basketball games where those cheerleaders. It's such a great thing to see the kids out of their element and having fun. So it was eye-opening for me because they're so little. You think of that in high school, and to see them cheering so hard and making friends and tough competition, it just warmed my heart. Brian, I'm sorry, you're going to keep us on track?
I was just about to say we've hit about 45 minutes in, and Ms. McDaniel did a great job, but I know Principal Williams has also got a few points that she wants to make, and Mr. Tatum has raised his hand. So I don't know if Ms. McDaniel, if that's all the items you had on your presentation, if we can transition to Ms. Williams, or.
But Mr. Noyes, can the AP, Ms. Buford Vernon, go and talk about instruction?
Certainly.
She can stay on that same slide. She's filling in for Miss Molly from Santa.
Great.
Mr. Tatum, you have a question?
Mr. Tatum, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we do a good job in communicating, but how can we do a better job in communicating to the overall school community? Now, we individual schools have emails and Facebook pages and things of that nature, but the overall school community, they don't know what's going on within the walls of our schools. And I think that's where the breakdown occurs, because the same communication is not being communicated across the board. I mean, it's never a time that we have had a school campaign to recognize the fact that here's how our school is going to operate. Here's what's going on in our school. Here's the do's and don'ts that goes on in our school. So I think we need to try to put our thinking caps on it and do some innovative and out of the box thinking, and how we're going to communicate better with the overall school community.
I agree, Mr. Tatum. And one of the first things is that it starts with us, right? There are lots of times, and people know this about me by now. If I see something that's just not true about a school, I will speak up. I know that next door, social media. One of the things that I always tell parents, I was just in a coffee and chat this weekend, is go see the school. There is nothing different happening at our schools that's not happening in West Cobb, East Cobb, North Fulton. These are kids. Middle schoolers don't change. They are the same everywhere. It is the age, it is development. So one of the things that I always encourage, and parents, you heard this, Mr. Jackson said this, go visit the school. Go visit the school before you make a decision about what's best for your child. I have one middle schooler that's about to go to high school, and we are visiting high schools right now to see where she will go. So I encourage everybody, first off, if you don't know, just ask. And number two, reach out to the principals or to the school. The principals are here, their staff is here to answer questions. So if you heard something, if something concerns you, ask. Okay, I know we're about to be done in 13 minutes before we can switch to Ms. Huff. So I guess, are we going on to instruction, Mr. Maxwell? Or Mr. Noyes, I'm sorry.
It's your
Yes.
call. It's your call, Ms. Warren.
Okay, so let's go to instruction and then upcoming events. And then parents, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. This is your time to ask the middle school principals.
Hello and good evening. My name is Tanya Buford Vernon. I'm the 6th grade assistant principal at Sandtown Middle School and the curriculum administrator. On behalf of Principal Miley, I'd like to welcome all community members for joining us this evening. So I'll be sharing information about instruction in District 4 middle schools. Currently, as you've heard previously, we are working with our scholars to prepare them for Milestones Prep. So there's extended learning and Saturday opportunities for our scholars to participate in. In addition, our scholars are taking SEL. They have student success skills on their schedules. They're taking part of those lessons with the teachers daily to work on those social and emotional skills, those soft skills that we've talked about. In addition, across our middle schools, our scholars have the opportunity to earn high school credits prior to leaving middle school. Many of our 8th grade scholars are enrolled in high school credit earning classes. We do have scholars leaving 8th grade with 5 credits, meaning they're technically a sophomore on their first day of high school. In addition, at Bear Creek Middle School, they are now piloting a gender academy for all girls and boys classes. At Camp Creek Middle School, there's STEM enrichment and an avid summer bridge program. In addition, at Renaissance Middle School, we also have students partaking in avid programs. And at Sandtown Middle School, we have taken the time to align ourselves to Westlake High School with a 100% feeder pattern where our scholars are on pre-pathways and the aligning to the pathways at the high school. So those students are taking both core and connections classes, or have the opportunity to take core and connections classes that align to the course offerings at the high school and leave us with high school credits. Our sixth grade scholars across the district are taking career awareness, so they're aware of these pathways and the connections courses to ensure they have the opportunity to enroll in classes that align to their interests and strengths. To ensure that our scholars are aware, as you have mentioned, as was previously mentioned, we had our rising sixth grade meeting with our feeder elementary schools the previous 2 weeks. So we've had parents have the opportunities to ask questions and hear about our offerings at Sandtown Middle School. And then over the summer, again, your scholars coming into middle school will have the opportunity to experience what it's like to be a middle school student by participating in the Summer Bridge program. So I thank you, Mr. Maxwell, Ms. Warren, and board members for this opportunity to join you this evening. On behalf of Principal Miley, have a good evening.
Thank you, Tanya. And I guess Principal Williams.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am going to just spend a few more minutes talking about community engagement and really just reiterating some of the same points shared by Mr. Jackson and Ms. McDaniel. We utilize several methods to ensure that our students and our parents remain updated and informed. So as Mr. Jackson mentioned, some of our schools have town hall meetings or student meetings with our scholars. They may be called grade level meetings or team meetings. And basically it's an opportunity where we provide updates with our students, and it's a time to celebrate our students. We may celebrate their academic achievements. We may celebrate their attendance and other school-related initiatives. Our schools communicate, as we said earlier, through our School Governance Council, which includes representation from parents and school staff and community members. Some of our schools provide quarterly semester principal updates. They may be called principal chats or coffee talks, but I definitely encourage you to visit our school's website for more information and dates. Our schools send out weekly or bi-weekly messages using a variety of platforms. Some of us use newsletters, so you may receive a newsletter via email or Twitter, or we use the Remind app, or we post it on our websites. Some of us create video messages, or you may receive a recorded call on your phone. We all tweet, and we encourage you to follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handles can be found on our websites or our newsletters. And our school websites are a great place to get information about our schools. I also mentioned the Remind app earlier, and some of you may receive teacher or grade level or school-wide text messages via the Remind app. And then of course our schools communicate via email and of course phone calls home. So I definitely encourage you to connect with your school's parent liaison or the school's front office, and they will be able to direct you to where you can find the most up-to-date information for your schools. Thank you.
And they can subscribe to you guys as s'mores, right? Because there's lots of things that are happening. Sometimes I forget. So I just subscribe to everybody's s'more because I see things. I'm like, oh, I didn't know about this. If they're a rising sixth grade parent and right now they're trying to figure out what to do with their children for next year, and this is for all of the principals, what would be the number one reason for them to come to their neighborhood school?
So we definitely want to support all of our schools. Our schools are a microcosm of our community. And so, of course, if we're supporting our schools and we're building up our schools, we're building up our communities. Many of our schools are having summer programs, summer bridge programs to help acclimate our rising sixth graders into our schools. Renaissance, I see a message in the chat box asking if we will have a summer program at Renaissance, and we will have a summer bridge program at Renaissance Middle School, but we'll also have a Wildcat camp for our rising seventh graders and our rising eighth graders to help reiterate those prerequisite skills that they need to be successful for the next grade level.
Ms. Williams, thank you for answering the question in the chat. And I think we're at about 55 minutes. So I don't know, Dr. Candace and Mr. Maxwell, if there's any more that we needed to address in the middle school portion, because we still do have Ms. Huff on to talk about enrollment projections.
That was it, Mr. Noyes.
Yes, that was it. And we'll continue to monitor the chat if people have questions following. So we are able to turn it over to Ms. Huff.
Awesome. So glad to work with such amazing leaders at the 4 middle schools. So thank you all for that. And Ms. Huff, if you're available still, we would love to have you come on and talk about enrollment.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ingrid Huff. I'm the Executive Director of Operational Planning and Student Assignment. Today, I'm going to share a presentation that I shared with the board in our pre-work session last week. And this is really a continuation of a conversation that we started with in this community meeting back in December. So I came and shared some information about how projections are developed. So this is kind of the update to that, providing the most recent information. So I'll just proceed through the presentation. If I can make it advance. Sorry. Right, so looking at our historical enrollment for the school district, this year enrollment was very modest increase of 39 students. Last year we experienced a phenomenal decline, about 3,500 students, and that was of course due to the COVID conditions of younger children typically not enrolling, a pervasive problem in South Fulton as well as North. We did see some of those students return at the kindergarten and first grade level, which really caused more of a stabilization of our enrollment this year. At our enrollment by region. So in North Fulton, Sandy Springs, and South Fulton. First, before I go over the numbers, I want to make note of a new region that's being highlighted here. So FAVE, Fulton Academy of Virtual Excellence, is a new region. So as I go through the regional numbers, understand that there are 1,349 students who would have been in one of these 3 geographic regions. So 1,349 students are not included in these numbers. And for South Fulton, 57%, which is about 760 students, came from South Fulton County that now currently attend the virtual school. So looking specifically at South Fulton County, enrollment totals reached 33,261 students, which is a 1-year decline of 658 in total. So keep in mind, again, 769 of those students are at the Fulton Academy of Virtual Excellence. So elementary totals declined by 508, middle schools by 251, and our high school total population increased by 101 students in South Fulton. You can see the changes in North Fulton, that region did decline, as well as in Sandy Springs. So these are our grade level enrollment trends. And let me just take a second to explain the graph. So this shows over a period of 5 years. Parents say that our enrollment is growing. I see new homes. I know people are moving into our county, and that is absolutely true. So while enrollment has been declining throughout the district for the last 5 years, our cohort growth is still continuing to grow. We actually grew 2,003 students within our current band of grades. So interpreting this graph, so you'd look at the first kindergarten class that started in 2017. As that grade level transitioned to first grade, that grade level grew by 96 students district-wide. Then when they went to second grade, it grew by 31. In 2020 to 21, we had a COVID impact, which caused a decline of that grade level by 293. But this year, that cohort grew again by 134 students. So this shows that the district continues to grow. I want to make a highlight and note our grade 8 to 9th grade population. This is not a new phenomenon. we grow exponentially between 8th and 9th grade district-wide. Some of our high schools have an 8th to 9th grade cohort survival ratio of over 40%, meaning that their 9th grade class is 40% greater than their incoming 8th grade. And we have this especially in District 4, where we have some of our magnet programs where students come back from private school, and you can see that enrollment growth. This graph also shows why our district as a whole is declining. So if you look at the bar graphs, just looking at the picture, the 12th grade class is considerably larger than the kindergarten class. So when you think about graduating those students out, if you continue to pull in smaller kindergarten classes, there's a natural shrinkage of enrollment. So that is why the total enrollment number is declining as the grade levels are still continuing to grow. What would have to occur for this to offset would be naturally development within our region and in our county, and we will talk about that just in here just shortly. So where do we see new students coming in? We always look at our Fulton County new home closings, and we contribute this to why our county continues to grow within our grade bands. So looking specifically at South Fulton County, and this is South Fulton, south of the city of Atlanta, in total, it's the strongest housing market that we have, looking at North, South, and Sandy Springs. And in the first quarter of 2021, this region peaked at over 500 new homes closing in the first quarter of 2021. So we can see that new home growth, everything, homes are closing, parents are moving into our area in South Fulton County in this region. But something else that may have impacted enrollment for this year and years past is private school enrollment. So looking at South Fulton County, we have about 1,696 students in South Fulton County who were reported living in the district but attending a private school. That number is slightly up this year. You can look at the bands, the colors, district-wide elementary cohort growth, elementary private school totals did trend up in all three regions. However, the opposite is true for homeschools. So last year we saw a tremendous tick up in homeschool enrollment across the district. So we were in virtual. A lot of schools, parents chose to homeschool their students or take advantage of other homeschool programs. This year, those numbers actually declined. In South Fulton County, 265 fewer students enrolled in homeschool than did the previous year. So that was a district decline of 33% from last year to this year. So looking regionally, I'll speak specifically of South Fulton County. So this shows a 2-year trend of enrollment. So during pandemic, the initial onset from 1920 to 2021, enrollment declined by 802 students. And this year in the region, we see a change of enrollment again of 658, keeping in mind that we have those students who are in the FAVE virtual school. As a district, again, enrollment very modest at 39 students, so very similar to what we saw last school year. Looking at our forecast, so when we started the process of projecting student enrollment, we were very optimistic that students would return to student counts would return to pre-pandemic levels. We were missing about 1,600 students from what would have been our normal trend for elementary, and we added those students back to their projections, expecting them to return to our school district. If you think about when the Delta variant hit, we were in late July, right before school started. And I think there were a lot of parents who decided to keep their younger children at home. And we can see that as an impact in our forecast. So we missed elementary projections by 1,600 students. And as I said, we put 1,400 back in the forecast that were not enrolled in school in the 2021 school year. So we did miss elementary considerably. Middle and high schools, middle schools by 204 students, and high schools were almost dead on by 29 students. So the forecast did miss the plus or minus 1% accuracy expectation, but just slightly, even though we did make that gross assumption at the elementary level. Looking at how well the forecast has fared for over numerous years, we have been pretty accurate with the exception of the 2 years where COVID did impact enrollment projections.
These details have resulted.
So looking at where we are as a district, so we like to compare other school districts to see if what we're experiencing in Fulton is similar to what other counties in the metro area are experiencing. This year, keeping in mind housing, pricing, affordability, we did see growth in the areas that continue to grow. Forsyth County, Gwinnett, Cherokee, and Henry County experienced growth, while Clayton and DeKalb were relatively flat, similar to Fulton. And then Atlanta and Cobb counties both decline. So you can see we're seeing where there's aggressive building, a rapid growth and affordability. Those regions, the growth, the housing market are offsetting those declines that we typically would see in a non-growing area. So looking at South Fulton, I'll take a second to explain these two maps that you're seeing presented. So what we have in the data is the number of single family, townhome, and condos that are available. So where will growth come in the future? So we're setting the stage for the projections. Of course, we'll look at existing enrollment, but where will new students come from? And we think that will come from the housing market. Based on the number of homes that we have in the South Fulton region, there are over 612 currently at the fourth quarter of 2021. Based on the average quarterly closing rate that was presented earlier, we have about 5 months of supply. That's 5 months of inventory if no additional homes were built in the region. That is considerably low. I'm sure those of you who have friends who've tried to move into your communities and in your neighborhoods, homes that go on the market sell very quickly. But there is a lot of development that's in the pipeline. We are tracking more than 44,665 units that are active, planned, or future within the district. So we anticipate the area to continue to grow. We anticipate to see impacts from this residential development in the future. So looking at our forecast observations, we have not reset or re-baseline our data, but we plan that cohorts will continue to grow to pre-pandemic levels. So it will take some time. We saw more elementary return in North Fulton than we did in South. But we hope that some of those elementary, younger primary grades, those students will return in the coming years. We have added additional grade levels at our 2 STEM schools, Innovation and Global Impact, for next school year, as well as a 12th grade for Faith. And as a region, ARC recently released their Atlanta Regional 25-year plan. Our population in Metro Atlanta, as well as Fulton County, is expected to continue to age. What this means for school districts and our enrollment is that our birth rates, and this is an international phenomena, is that birth rates are declining. Our population is aging, which is going to have a negative impact on population and school age growth for children entering the district. So in South Fulton County specific, we expect enrollment or forecast to remain relatively stable. So when you think about enrollment, we've had 2 years of relatively low kindergarten and first grade, particularly in South Fulton County. The way projections work is they build off of existing populations. Until those students return back to the district, residential growth cannot offset that. So you would see a natural shrinkage of enrollment in South Fulton, but because of the aggressive assumptions around development, the number of new homes that are being added to the region, development is offsetting what would be a natural decline. The active housing market is poised for solid growth, and we do have assumptions as Hateville Charter Middle School. We've assumed a large percentage of those students will return to their residential home schools for middle school next year. This year, for the first time, we wanted to do a check of some of our enrollment projections. As I said, we've been very accurate, but it's always good to have another external party review what your data and see if our trends are similar. Very similar methodologies using a cohort survival model. But just comparing the two, you can see the difference. So Fulton County Schools is the golden orange line. We're expecting a decline from about 90,415 down to 86,691 in the future. Their assumptions were a little bit more dramatic because their model has an additional supplemental report that does not consider development. That would give you some potential student impact should you anticipate development as a part of this. So we have some additional data that's more relative development within the county. That's a little more specific. That provides us a greater insight into that. We also use student yield. So that's the number of students that we expect from new housing units. We have that specific to each of our high schools because what we see in the Banneker cluster versus Westlake versus North Springs versus Johns Creek, they're very different. So we have different student yields for each high school zone, which gives us more specific data in regards to student impact for future development. And then we also consider Fulton County specific birth rates, not Fulton County wide birth rates, which would have impacts from the city of Atlanta. And we also assume similar K to K populations in our model. It's because that's the trend that we typically see is our kindergarten sizes are very similar across each region. And then our model and methodology projects students where they attend school versus where they live. So if we have any students who are going, taking advantage of any of our IB and foreign language programs at Riverwood, or if they're participating in open enrollment, we project those students and the rate of transition between one grade in one school to another school. We project that within our model, and their model projects students where they live solely. So looking at 5 years out, we do expect enrollment again in South Fulton to, for the most part, stabilize. Looking at the long range, the difference is very negligible. A slight, actually almost the exact same number at elementary. For 5 years, middle school, we are expected to decline, but keep in mind again, the students who are in kindergarten and first grade, they create the base in a 5-year projection for our middle school population. For next year, we are expecting some decline in the region, but keep in mind the purpose of the long range estimate is to identify future capital needs. We are hopeful that, and we just passed our capital plan 2027. So we're very fortunate that we had those plans and those numbers in place before COVID. And we're very hopeful that enrollment will stabilize and return before we start developing capital plan 2032, which would speak to future needs and probably encompass the return of those COVID students, as well as more realistic and more ideal numbers for any impact that we would see in the future from residential development. So that concludes my presentation, and Mr. Noyes or Ms. Warren, I am more than happy to take any questions that the community may have.
Thank you, Ms. Huff. I don't see any questions in the chat regarding the enrollment. I'm looking for anybody that may have their hand raised. I know there was a lot of information to take in, very important information. And we appreciate you going through it all very thoroughly as you do your work and have been very successful in making these predictions. We know with the adjustments of COVID, you're revising and looking at these things, but I don't see any questions, Ms. Warren.
So one of the things, Ms. Huff, we talked about this the last time you were here, and thank you for always coming with so much data. We talked about that this upcoming fall semester, we would be talking about rezoning, redistricting some of our areas that we know are populated. There's a process that goes through that. And I've had people come in the community and say, I was zoned for this place last year and it's changed. And I always explain to people that's not what's happened because we do not rezone often. Can you give them a very high level view of what that will look like?
Yes, ma'am. So we will, first let me say that redistricting is a community-driven process. So I'm not sure what those parents may have been speaking of. However, it's been at least 4 or 5 years since we have had a rezoning. But we will first begin by sharing information with each school to share with their community. We'll have press releases, and there will be series of meetings. So we first start with our board members, and we'll come out and speak in their meetings to just give the community a high-level overview of what the redistricting process looks like. We will then, in the fall, around September, October, we'll start the conversation with actual community meetings, and those will be held in the areas of focus. So let's say, for example, if we were looking to redistrict, I'll just throw one out, Bear Creek Middle School. We would decide, where the meeting should be held. We would come and engage the parents. The first meeting, we will ask a series of questions, so there will be no maps. We have board criteria for how redistricting occurs and what would justify a move and how we make those transitions and moves. So we will ask a series of questions related to primary and secondary criteria. We will then, in the second round of meetings, which is normally in October, in November, we will have maps, multiple maps. So the community can give us feedback on what they like about the maps, what they don't like about the maps. And then in our final round, which will be held in December, we'll come back with a reduced number of options. So we'll take the feedback from each session. Everything will be publicly presented on our website. Parents will be able to engage, be a part of that discussion. We'll have trained facilitators there to engage them and get their feedback. The board will be on the sideline. So the board actually engages with the community after staff presents a final recommendation. That will typically be presented in January with a final read in February. Once those lines are approved and go into place, then our staff will go about the process of notifying impacted families for the upcoming school year.
For that,
so it's a full-blown open process, very transparent, and it is on our website. So we will share all of the information, all of the comments, all the feedback, all the maps. When we're going through redistricting, parents definitely know that we are in redistricting mode.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I don't think we have any more questions. I want to thank everybody for their time tonight. It looks like we might get out of here a little bit early. As always, parents, you can always email me if you have a question, concern. We are here for the community, and I just want to applaud all the staff members who are on here. We're in a very difficult time in education right now, and from school level to district level, people are giving 100%. So we just ask that you continue to work with us. If there's a concern, please bring it to us so that we can address it. And my next community meeting will be at Creekside High School. The panel will be around student engagement. And we have invited some people. I don't want to say who yet until they confirm. I think Mr. Davis had a question, and then we'll end it. Mr. Davis?
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell Ms. Huff, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
That's a great way to finish.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Very
Brian. You want to take it off from here? Thank you, guys. Have a good one, and we appreciate you guys. See, staff, we got out 13 minutes early.
There you go. Thank you, Ms. Warren. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night. We'll see you guys this Thursday at board meeting. And this will be, Brian, when this is downloaded, can you just forward it to me, please? Or send it to me, send me the link or whatnot.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.